Hey, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Down the Mine Shaft with Triz. I am Triz. And so recently, for whatever reason, I started thinking about old 80s movies, right? Like the cheesy Gremlins and Goonies and stuff. And for whatever reason, it led me to watching Nightmare on Elm Street. And I watched about half of it. And for some reason, I ended up on YouTube searching or watching a documentary about the behind the scenes, the making of. And Wes Craven was talking about like where he got the idea from. Blew my mind. I never heard of it. I was like, what? So for you non-history people, so in after the Vietnam War ended, Cambodia went through some unrest, and a guy named Pol Pot gained power. Now Pol Pot was right up there with Stalin and Hitler. He was not a good dude. The killing fields, Khmer Rouge, he killed thousands of people brutally. White women, children, men. He was ousted, and we cut a deal with Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos to allow people that had helped us, people that were like in, lost villages and stuff. We allowed them to migrate to the United States. A majority of those people were the Hmong people, Hmong. The Hmong people were from Cambodia, Vietnam, and Laos, but they lived up in the mountains. I think they would kind of be what you would call, Appalachian people in the United States, right? They're just kind of like mountain people. So we let them migrate in the late 70s by the thousands to the United States. And a lot of the Hmong men between the ages of 20 and 30 started dying. Like hundreds of people started dying in their sleep. And at first, scientists assumed that it was probably some type of nerve agent or toxin from the war that had gotten into the bloodstream, but nothing was found. So they were puzzled, like what was killing all these guys? They started interviewing some of the family members. And I read where one mother said that her son kept telling her that he couldn't go to sleep. So he was taking caffeine pills and stuff. And when she asked why, he said, because there's somebody after me, or something is after me. And if I sleep, he's going to get me. An uncle of a gentleman said pretty much the same thing, that it was unlike him. This guy was real book smart and stuff, and he said he started not wanting to go to sleep. He was scared to death of falling asleep, and so he started noticing a pattern. Like all these people are saying that there's something after them. What's going on here? So the Hmong people, they're a very ancestral believing people. Like, so they believe that, much like some of the Mexican people, that your ancestors are like in another world, but it's kind of tied to this world where you can still communicate, make offerings. Certain times a year you can maybe communicate directly. And the scientists started thinking, well, could it be psychological? Could it be that these people, were thinking that their ancestors were mad or disappointed because they left their homeland, and that's why this is happening? It said victims predominantly young Hmong men between 20 and 30s. Symptoms were reports of vivid nightmares, sleep paralysis, gasping, signs of terror. No physical trauma, No clear medical cause of death. If you would have asked me a few weeks ago about sleep paralysis, I wouldn't have never had it. But I have since then, like a week and a half ago. First time I ever had it. And I remember I knew I was sleeping, but I couldn't do anything. So I remember, like, in my mind, I was telling myself, like, dude, break through. Because I wanted to turn around. I was laying on my side. And I remember kind of treating it like when you, like, break through a door that's stuck, you know, like a 1, 2, 3, like, you know. And I remember doing that in my head, like 1, 2, 3, turn. And I just couldn't. I just couldn't turn. And then I just came out of it, and I woke up, and I was just like, wow. I hated that feeling. It's such a helpless feeling. So these guys were saying that, a lot of them were saying that they were paralyzed, and this entity would come, and they knew he was coming, but they couldn't do anything. And luckily they would wake up, but if they didn't wake up, they'd be dead. And a lot of them were telling their family this, and then the following night they were dead. So scientists were looking at the psychological aspect of it, which is amazing to me. Like, you can believe something to a point where I'm going to die. That's what I'm going to think. And then that's what happens is crazy to me. I mean, that's insane to me. This whole thing developed actually into something called sudden unexplained nocturnal death syndrome, SUNS. So a lot of them said that it was a malevolent spirit that sits on the chest and suffocates the sleeper. Matches accounts of paralysis, pressure, and fear before death. They could have been suffering from lack of access to traditional spiritual rituals and healers in the U.S., and it might have heightened their vulnerability. And fear and anxiety spread throughout the Hmong community, and over time, incidences declined significantly. So whatever it was probably tied to the war. I think some of this was mental. These people, they were away from their homeland. They had seen atrocities. They couldn't make retribution how they thought, and it ended up them dying. Hundreds of people, by the way. Like, it's not just 10 people. Hundreds of people died, young men, totally healthy, died in their sleep because they thought something was after them. The same ethnicity, the same nationality, the same group of people. How do you explain that? The phenomenon remains largely unresolved, but is considered a combination of biological, psychological, and cultural factors. It sparked medical and anthropological interest in culture-bound syndromes. And it became a key case study in understanding how trauma, belief systems, and sociology interact. And it was the clear inspiration for Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, I remember talking to my friends, and we'd always talk about, like, who did you think was the scariest out of all those guys and stuff? And Freddy Krueger in itself was never that scary to me. The hat, the burned up face, and the shirt. The glove was cool, but it's impractical. I mean, one swipe with that thing, it would get caught in your skin or something. He'd get one shot, and that would be it. But the terrifying thing about Freddy, I always thought, was that he could get you in your dreams. I mean, and once you see him in your dreams, he can. It's his world, so he can make his arms long. He can appear out of nowhere. He can basically Beetlejuice you, and that part is frightening. Like Jason, Michael Myers. I mean, Michael Myers I always thought was laughable, but Jason kind of was scary looking. But even as a kid, I was like, dude, I could outrun that guy. There's no way. Like, it'll show some girl running through the woods, and then he'll be like, I know it's hack now, but how many people have talked about this over the years, but he'd be way back there, and then she'd fall, and then boom, he'd be right there. Dude, Jason ain't catching me. I promise you that. He's not even getting close to me. But Freddy, you have to go to sleep, right? And the fact that it can be, if you have weird dreams like me, you can be anywhere at any time, and this guy's trying to kill you. That is frightening. I mean, but the craziest part is 40, 50 years ago, this movie was made, and I've never even heard of this. Never even heard of this. It's, I guess, in the 80s and stuff, we weren't as racially open nowadays. I mean, if you were a Hmong, you'd probably would have heard, but they probably weren't giving this too much air, but they should have, because it's frightening. So next thing I wanted to talk about a bit is the band Sublime. So Sublime came across my radar, actually, the Hard Lemonade of the mid to late 90s. That was the first kind of thing before I even heard Santeria, which was the first song I heard by the band. I remember that beverage being sold, and it was long before Mike's Hard Lemonade was sold in stores. You had this Sublime Hard Lemonade, and on the back of the bottle, I remember it saying, all proceeds go to Brad Noel Foundation or whatever. Brad Noel was the lead singer of the band Sublime. I don't think people give them the respect that they deserve. And partially due to the fact that they were DOA. Like, the band was dead on arrival, right? As soon as their album dropped, they were dead. So when I lived in California in my 20s for a little bit, I remember somebody telling me the story. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've always heard that he was at a hotel with his wife and child, and Brad had been clean for about a week. He suffered from a heroin addiction, but he got it quite late in life. He wasn't like a junkie all of his life, but he picked it up in his late 20s. And he had been clean for a week, and he had all intentions on living a sober, clean life. And their record was about to drop. They had just signed with a record label, and they were finishing up some songs and getting the masters done. And he was at a hotel with his wife, and his wife had taken his kid somewhere. Jacob, his name is Jacob Noel. His wife had taken his kid somewhere to do something, and Brad was in the hotel room, and he either scored heroin or he found it in his luggage or something, but he had taken the same amount as he normally did, thinking nothing would happen. But when people are clean for a week, you can lose that tolerance, that's how a lot of people overdose. And of course, when she came back that night, he was dead. But I think he died in May 96. He was 28 years old. Talking about a young guy. But he was the driving force behind the band. He wrote the songs. Without Brad, there is no Sublime. In fact, since he's died, they've never even been close to having a hit, or even, I don't even think they even attempted. The problem is like, they're being a band member in that band must really suck, though, because all your eggs are in this guy's basket. their first album, I think it dropped in July of that year. So 2 months after he dies, their album comes out, Santeria, and just blows up. I mean, who hasn't heard the song Santeria? So to be a band member in that band, these guys have been touring, playing little crappy gigs throughout Southern California and some Texas shows, for almost a decade, and they your lead singer overdoses, and that has to be a really crappy spot to be in. But he never got to see the fame. He never got to know that's how many people Sublime would actually reach. And their influence is vast. I mean, they've influenced Gwen Stefani from No Doubt openly says without Sublime there is no doubt. Ska Kings, Long Beach Dub All Stars, Slightly Stupid, 311, Less Than Jake, Blink 182, Offspring, Fishbone. They were like the first band to bring this kind of Jamaican reggae, Southern California sound with a little bit of ska and kind of make it radio friendly. He had really catchy hooks, really dark, deep lyrics. He often talked about his heroin addiction and like in Pool Shark and they've had a ton of songs. I mean, if you read the list here, the Santeria, Badfish, Doing Time, Garden Grove Vocal, What I've Got, Smoke Two Joints, Caress Me Down, Wrong Way, Pawn Shop, April 29th, 1992. I mean, we're talking a band that wasn't a one-hit wonder by any stretch of the imagination. And it's just a shame that these guys don't get the respect that they should. They were touring for a while with Sublime, the existing members of the band. It was called Sublime with Rome, and they had a guy named Rome singing for them. But recently now, Brad's son Jacob Noel has started singing with his dad, and I checked some of his stuff out today, and he sounds a lot like his dad. Whether or not he has the gift of the songwriting like his dad had, I'm not sure, but it's very rare do you see a band get to the height of popularity and fame like they did, and the lead singer never even sees it. I think I heard that happen with Otis Redding as well. These guys that they die before they ever can really blow up to anything. But I don't know. I always thought every time I hear Sublime, their stuff still played on the radio all the time. Every time I hear their stuff, I always leave it on. I think it's pretty good. I'm not really sure how many people know. So if you look at the Latin words for numbers from 1 to 12, when you start getting past 6, you start noticing something very familiar, and that is the months. So at one point in history, December was actually the 10th month, so that's why it was called December. November, nov being the Latin prefix there, is for 9. This was until Julius Caesar made July, named July after the Julii family. And then Emperor Augustus afterwards made August, which pushed all those months forward by 2. I believe July, before it was called July, was called Quintilius. But yeah, that's why we have the names of these months. They're kind of off by 2 now. So September, October, November, December, they don't really match their meaning. But the days of the week, a lot of people don't really realize that our days of the week, there's only one that's named after a Roman god. The rest are named after Norse gods. So you start out with the Sunday, and then you start out with Moon Day, right? And then you get to the god Tu, which is pronounced Tiw or Tyr. He was the god of law and combat. He was the son of Odin and brother of Thor. So it was one of Odin's kids. He was a god. So that's where Tuesday comes from. And then Wednesday, which I feel like most people pronounce that wrong, but it's a weird spelling. Wednesday is named after Woden or Odin. The Anglo-Saxons called it Woden. We now kind of call it Odin, but Woden's Day. Odin was the kind of the Zeus for the Norse, I believe. I think he was the top guy up in Valhalla, which was the afterlife for soldiers. I believe he had two. I know he had two kids for sure. He had two, and then he had Thor, which is where Thursday comes from. It's Thor's Day, right? The day of Thor. And Thor was son of Odin. He was the brother of two as well. He was the god of thunder. And he was married to a lady named Frida or Frigg or Frigga. There's a lot of pronunciations for these gods. She was the goddess of love and beauty. And Frigga's Day or Frida's Day is where we get Friday from. And then you have the Roman god, Saturn, right? Saturday, Saturn's Day. He was the god of rest, peace, and abundance. So it kind of makes sense there. But so we have Saturn, our planet named after Saturn and Saturday. Our planets are all Roman gods, / Greek. Some of them are pretty much Greek as well, but Pluto, Neptune, Jupiter. Jupiter was just from all the books I've read, I know Jupiter was the god. Jupiter and Mars were the gods prayed to mostly from the soldiers. But yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people, you're brought up with these days of the week, days of the months, and you don't really think about, that they're named after gods. Yeah, I don't know. Just thought it was interesting.